You hear it all the time, right? The information age, information overload, we're swimming in it. But what if the way we think about information, what it is at its very core, is completely wrong? Today, we're going to dig into a pretty radical idea about the life cycle of information, one that might just flip how you see everything.
So let's just jump right in with a big question. We're constantly told that information is this driving force in our world. But what if it's all backward? Seriously, what if information isn't the cause of things happening, but actually the effect?
Okay, this quote really nails the core idea. Now, ontological priority sounds super academic, but all it's really asking is what comes first. We've been trained to think information is this primary thing, the leader, the cause. But this argument says nope. It says information is secondary. It's a reaction that can only happen after something else is already there. This is what some call the great inversion. And it's actually pretty simple when you think about it. You can't have information about something until that something actually exists and has some rules, right? A blueprint for a house can't exist before the concept of a house. Information is just a description of a system. It doesn't create the system. The system, the structure, always has to come first. So, if information is just a description, then what in the world is it describing? And how do we even get to a point where we can describe something? Well, that brings us right to step one in this new life cycle. The simple act of making distinctions. This is all about establishing the playing field where information can eventually come to life. The key word here is subdivision. And don't let the technical term throw you, because the idea is something we do all the time. Just picture a big, uncut block of clay. At first, it's just a lump. It's a unified whole. Subdivision is simply the act of drawing lines in that clay, setting up boundaries, and carving it into smaller, separate, and, measurable pieces. And it really just breaks down into two moves. First, you take that whole thing and you partition it. You break it up. Then, and this is key, you clearly define those pieces. You give them boundaries and turn them into distinct objects. These objects become the basic building blocks of your system. Without them, you've got nothing to measure, nothing to describe, nothing to talk about. You've just created the foundation. Okay, so we've made our distinctions. We've got our objects. What's next? That leads us straight into step two. Thinking about information purely as a concept of chance. Now that we have things, we can actually start measuring how they're arranged. And this is a really crucial point. We love to talk about information like it has a mind of its own, like it's intelligent. But in this model, you have to strip all of that away. Information isn't smart. It's not magic. It's just a mechanical metric. It's a way of using math to describe the state of our system. It's just numbers. So how does this math work? Well, it's basically a three-step process. Let's use an analogy. Say you have a handful of Scrabble tiles. First, you just assign a value to them, right? You've got an H, an E, two L's, and an O. That's numerical assignment. Second, you think about all the possible combinations those letters could make. That's comparative configuration. And third, you look at the actual word you spelled, hello, and you measure how specific, how non-random that is compared to just a jumble of letters. That measurement, that degree of non-randomness, that's the information. But here's the kicker. Even after we have this perfect mathematical description, the information itself can't do anything. It is, for all intents and purposes, inert. Think about a super detailed treasure map. The map is incredibly useful, right? It describes exactly where the gold is. But the map itself can't pick up a shovel and dig. It's just a passive description of a state. So, how do we get from a passive description to an actual result? How does the treasure actually get dug up? Well, that requires our third and final step in the life cycle, the mechanical bridge. This is the crucial part where we turn all that abstract math into a real-world outcome. This little table makes the rules crystal clear. Information is the blueprint, but you absolutely need a builder to actually put up the house. Information is the recipe, but you need a chef to bake the cake. The information is abstract and inert. It needs an active agent, what we're calling a machine, to make anything happen at all. And this so-called machine has two really important jobs. First, it has to translate. It takes that raw numerical data, that description of chance, and it turns it into a set of instructions it can actually understand. And second, it has to build. It follows those instructions, uses the information as a template, and creates a real-world result. It reads the recipe, then it bakes the cake. Simple as that. All right, let's pull all these threads together. These three steps, creating the objects, measuring their state, and then using a machine to act on that measurement, they aren't just a random sequence. They form this tight, inseparable structure. These are the three pillars of dependency, and they define this whole new way of looking at reality. Honestly, if you only take one single thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this. Information never leads. Ever. It always follows the architecture of the system that was built for it in the first place. The system comes first. The structure comes first. Always. And these are the three pillars that hold that reality up. They're totally non-negotiable. First, you have to create distinctions to have objects. Second, you have to accept that information is just a mathematical measurement of chance. And third, you have to have an active machine to turn those inert numbers into real action. You need all three, in that order. And yeah, the sequence is absolutely everything. As this quote puts it so well, if you break this chain of cause and effect, if you try to have information before you have objects, or action before you have a machine to act, the whole concept just completely falls apart. It stops being information and just becomes noise. And that's where we'll end things. Because if information isn't some magical guiding force, but is really just a reflection of the systems that we ourselves design and build, well, then the responsibility lands right back on us, doesn't it? It forces us to stop asking what the information is telling us and start asking a much, much bigger question. What kind of systems are we choosing to build in the first place? And because of those choices, what kind of world are we creating?